The smell traveled through the wandering star like a ghost. It moved through air vents and slipped under doors. It floated past sleeping quarters and workstations. Most of the adult Velcari wrinkled their noses and made sounds of annoyance. "The humans are doing something strange again," said one engineer to another. "Burning their food, probably. Such a waste." "Let them have their odd customs," his friend replied. "They are good workers, even if they are strange." The adults shook their heads and returned to their tasks. To them, the smell was unpleasant and confusing. Their noses were designed for hunting raw prey, for tracking blood and fresh meat across frozen plains. Cooked food meant nothing to them but destruction and waste. But the cubs were different. Kira and Bora moved through the corridors like tiny hunters on a mission. Their noses worked constantly, pulling in the air and analyzing every particle. To their young senses, the smell was not bad at all. It was fascinating. It was exciting. It made their mouths water and their stomachs growl. They had never felt this way about food before. Raw meat was just fuel to them, something they ate because they had to. But this smell promised something different. This smell promised warmth and comfort and satisfaction. Bara was the first to find the right corridor. She was the quieter of the two twins, more careful and observant. Her sister Kira was bolder and louder, always running ahead without thinking. But when it came to tracking, Bora had no equal. "This way," Bora whispered, her voice barely louder than a breath. Kira followed her sister through the empty hallway of Deck 7. Most crew members were at the station or in the main areas of the ship. This part was quiet and forgotten. Perfect for secrets. They reached a door that looked like all the other doors, but the smell was strongest here. It poured through the cracks around the frame, rich and complex and absolutely irresistible. The cubs sat down in front of the door and stared at it. "What do we do?" Kira asked. Bora thought about this. They were not supposed to be here. They were not supposed to bother the humans. Their mother had told them many times to stay away from the other species on the ship. Cubs were precious to the Velcari, and contact with outsiders was limited for their protection. But the smell was so good. Bora lifted her small paw and scratched at the door. The sound was soft, almost too soft to hear. When nothing happened, Kira joined in, scratching a little harder. Still nothing. Then Bora did something she had not done since she was a tiny baby. She whimpered. The sound came from deep in her throat, a high-pitched cry that meant please in the ancient language of the Velcari. It was a sound that cubs used with their mothers when they were hungry or scared. Inside the kitchen, Yuna heard the scratching and the whimpering. She froze with a spoon in her hand, her heart suddenly beating fast. What was that? An animal? A broken machine? She walked slowly to the door and pressed the button to open it. Two small, fluffy faces looked up at her with enormous golden eyes. Yuna gasped and stepped back. She recognized the captain's cubs immediately. Everyone on the ship knew Kira and Bora, though few had ever been close to them. They were beautiful in the way that all young creatures are beautiful, with soft fur and round cheeks and expressions of pure innocence. "Oh no," Yuna whispered. "You should not be here." The cubs did not move. They just kept staring at her with those big eyes, their noses twitching toward the food behind her. Kira's tail began to wag slowly, unconsciously. Yuna looked down the corridor. It was empty. No one had seen the cubs come here. If she closed the door right now and pretended nothing had happened, maybe everything would be fine. But then Bora made another sound. It was not a whimper this time. It was something softer and sadder, a tiny cry of longing that seemed to reach directly into Yuna's heart. Yuna had never had children of her own. She and Taiho had talked about it sometimes, about starting a family after this mission. But right now, looking at these two small creatures begging at her door, she felt something maternal stir inside her. "Come in," she heard herself say. Quickly, before someone sees you. The cubs rushed past her legs and into the kitchen. They looked around with wonder at the strange equipment and the steaming pots. Their noses worked overtime, drinking in every smell. Yuna closed the door and leaned against it, her mind racing. She had just invited the captain's children into her secret kitchen. If anyone found out, it could be a disaster. The Velcari might see it as an attempt to harm their precious cubs. At best, she would be in serious trouble. At worst, she could cause a diplomatic incident between humans and Velcari. But the cubs looked so happy. They were practically dancing around the small room, sniffing at everything, their tails wagging so hard their whole bodies shook. "Are you hungry?" Yuna asked. Even though she knew they could not understand her, Kira looked at her and made a sound that clearly meant yes. Yuna bit her lip. Feeding alien children without permission was definitely against the rules. What if Velcari could not digest cooked food? What if she made them sick? What if the captain hunted her down and tore her apart for poisoning her babies? But those golden eyes were impossible to resist. "Just a tiny taste," Yuna said, more to herself than to them. Something safe. Something simple. She took a small bowl and put a spoonful of plain white rice in it. No spice, no sauce, nothing that could hurt them. Just soft, warm, cooked grain. She placed the bowl on the floor between the two cubs. Kira sniffed it first, her nose nearly touching the rice. Then she took a tiny bite. The sound she made was unlike anything Yuna had ever heard. It was joy and surprise and pleasure all mixed together. Bora pushed her sister aside and took her own bite, and she made the same incredible sound. Within seconds, the rice was gone. The cubs looked up at Yuna with new expressions on their faces. It was not just hunger anymore. It was love. More? Kira seemed to ask, pushing the empty bowl with her nose. Yuna knew she was making a terrible mistake. She knew she should stop right now, send the cubs away, and pretend this never happened. But she could not. She simply could not say no to those faces. "Do not tell your mother," she whispered as she spooned more rice into the bowl. The cubs did not understand her words, but they understood her kindness. And somewhere deep in their young hearts, a bond was beginning to form. The ship called Wandering Star moved slowly through the darkness of space. It was a large vessel, built for long journeys between stars. Inside lived many different beings, working together to explore the unknown parts of the galaxy. Among them were two humans named Yuna and Taiho. Yuna was a scientist who studied alien life. She was 32 years old, with kind eyes and quick hands. Her husband Taiho worked as an engineer, fixing machines and making human technology work with alien systems. They had been living on this ship for 8 months now, far from their home on Earth. The ship belonged to the Velcari, a race of tall, wolf-like creatures with thick gray fur and golden eyes. They walked on 2 legs like humans, but had long tails and pointed ears that moved when they listened. The Velcari were proud hunters from a frozen world. They were strong and fierce, but they were also fair and honest. Captain Rova commanded the Wandering Star. She stood almost 7 feet tall, with silver-white fur and scars on her muzzle from old battles. Her voice was deep and commanding, and every crew member respected her. She had 2 young cubs named Kira and Bora, twins who were about 6 years old in human terms. The cubs lived on the ship with their mother, as was the Velcari custom for single parents. Yuna liked watching the cubs play in the corridors. They were small and fluffy, with oversized paws and ears too big for their heads. They chased each other, wrestled, and made high-pitched yipping sounds when they were happy. But they never came close to Yuna or Taiho. The Velcari kept their children away from other species. It was their way. Life on the ship was comfortable but strange. The Velcari ate their meat raw and cold. They found the idea of cooking very odd. Why would anyone burn perfectly good food? To them, heat destroyed the natural taste and wasted energy. When Yuna first tried to explain Korean cooking to a Velcari crew member, he had looked at her like she was crazy. But Yuna missed cooking more than almost anything else from Earth. She missed the smell of rice steaming in a pot. She missed the sound of meat sizzling in a hot pan. She missed the taste of her grandmother's recipes, passed down through generations. Food was not just fuel to Yuna. Food was memory. Food was love. Food was home. So she had started a secret project in the ship's hydroponics bay, where plants grew under artificial lights. Yuna had claimed a small corner for herself. She told the Velcari botanist that she needed the plants for scientific research. This was partly true, but mostly she was growing ingredients. Green onions, garlic, cabbage for kimchi, chili peppers that made her eyes water when she cut them. Taiho knew about her project and helped when he could. He thought she was a little crazy, but he also missed home cooking. He missed sitting at a table with warm food and good company. He missed feeling human in this ship full of aliens. One morning, Captain Rova made an announcement to the whole crew. The Wandering Star would stop at a remote station for 3 days of repairs and resupply. Most crew members would have free time. Yuna's heart jumped with excitement. 3 days was enough time. 3 days was perfect. She found Taiho in his workshop, surrounded by tools and machine parts. "I need your help," she said quietly, looking around to make sure no one else could hear. Taiho raised an eyebrow. "What are you planning?" "There is an empty storage room on deck 7. Nobody uses it. I want to turn it into a kitchen." Taiho put down his tools and stared at her. "A kitchen?" "Yuna, if the captain finds out, she will not find out. I just need proper ventilation so the smells do not spread through the ship." "You can do that, right?" He sighed, but there was a small smile on his face. "I can do that. But if we get in trouble, I am blaming you." They worked together over the next 2 days. Taiho installed a small heating unit and connected it to a ventilation system that would filter the air before sending it back into the ship's recyclers. Yuna brought in pots and pans she had traded for at the last space station. She gathered her precious ingredients from the hydroponics bay. On the first day of the repair stop, while most of the crew was busy at the station, Yuna finally had her chance. She stood in her tiny kitchen, surrounded by everything she needed. Her hands trembled slightly as she picked up a knife and began to cut vegetables. She was going to make kimchi jjigae, a spicy stew that her grandmother used to cook every winter. The recipe was simple, but required patience. First, she fried pieces of pork belly until they turned golden and crispy. The sound and smell made her eyes fill with tears. It had been so long. Then she added aged kimchi, letting it cook until it softened and released its sour, spicy flavor. She poured in water and let it boil, then added tofu cut into soft cubes. In a separate pot, she cooked white rice until it was fluffy and perfect. The smells filled the small room. Garlic, chili, pork fat, fermented vegetables. To Yuna, it smelled like her grandmother's kitchen on a cold day. It smelled like childhood. It smelled like everything good in the universe. She did not know that Taiho's ventilation system was not working as well as he had promised. The filters were catching most of the smell, but not all of it. Tiny particles of aroma were escaping into the ship's air system, traveling through vents and corridors. She did not know that somewhere on the ship, 2 small cubs had stopped playing. Their ears stood straight up. Their little noses twitched rapidly, catching something they had never smelled before. Kira looked at her twin sister Bora. Mora looked back at Kira. They did not have words for what they were feeling. It was like hunger, but different. It was like curiosity, but stronger. Something deep inside them, some ancient instinct, was waking up. Without speaking, they began to move. They left their quarters and padded softly through the corridors on their small paws, following the strange and wonderful smell. They did not know where it was leading them. They only knew they had to find it. In a kitchen, Yuna tasted her stew and smiled. It was perfect. She had no idea that her simple act of cooking was about to change everything. The cubs ate like they had never eaten before. They finished the second bowl of rice even faster than the first. Their small tongues licked every grain from the bottom of the bowl. Their eyes were bright with happiness, and their tails never stopped wagging. Watched them with a mixture of joy and worry. She was happy to see them enjoy her food, but she was also very aware of the danger she was in. Every minute the cubs stayed in her kitchen was another minute someone might notice. They were missing, but the cubs showed no sign of wanting to leave. Kira, the bolder twin, walked up to Yuna and pressed her furry head against the human's leg. It was a gesture of trust and affection. Velcari cubs only did this with family members, with people they felt safe around. Yuna had seen them do it with their mother, but never with anyone else. Her heart melted. She reached down carefully and touched the soft fur on top of Kira's head. The cub made a sound of pure contentment, like a cat purring, but deeper and more musical. Bora watched her sister for a moment, then slowly walked over and pressed against Yuna's other leg. Now she had two alien cubs leaning against her, looking up at her like she was the most wonderful person in the universe. "You two are going to get me in so much trouble," Yuna said softly. The door suddenly opened, and Taiho walked in. He stopped dead, his eyes going wide at the scene before him. "Yuna," he said very slowly, "why are there Velcari cubs in our kitchen?" "I can explain," Yuna started. "Why are they eating our food?" "They found me. I could not turn them away." "Why are they touching you like that?" "Velcari cubs never touch outsiders." Yuna looked down at the cubs, who had not moved from her legs. "I think they like me." Taiho closed the door quickly and leaned against it, his face pale. "The captain will kill us. Actually kill us. She will tear us into small pieces and scatter us across space. She will not find out. The cubs will tell her." Cubs tell their mothers everything. Yuna had not thought of that. Velcari cubs might not speak perfect language yet, but they could certainly communicate. How long before Kira and Bora told their mother about the nice human with the warm food? But before she could worry more, Bora did something unexpected. The shy cub had been looking at the pot of kimchi jjigae on the heating unit. The stew was still warm, sending gentle steam into the air. Without warning, Bora walked over and stood on her back legs, trying to see inside the pot. "No, that is too spicy for you," Yuna said quickly, moving toward the cub. But Bora had already dipped her nose near the surface. The smell of the stew filled her small nostrils, and her whole body trembled with desire. She looked back at Yuna with eyes that begged and pleaded. "Just the broth," Yuna decided. "No kimchi, no chili. Just the broth." She took a clean bowl and carefully spooned out some of the liquid from the stew, avoiding the spicy ingredients. The broth was rich with the flavor of pork and garlic, but without the hot chili. She let it cool for a moment, then placed it on the floor. Both cubs rushed to the bowl. They took turns lapping up the broth like it was the finest thing they had ever tasted. And in a way, it was. Their species had eaten nothing but raw meat for thousands of years. They had never experienced the complex flavors that cooking could create. This simple broth was like discovering a new color that nobody knew existed. When they finished, something changed in them. The frantic energy of the hunt was gone. They were calm now, satisfied in a way that raw food had never made them feel. Kira yawned widely, showing her small, sharp teeth. Bora's eyes were half closed with contentment. And then Bora did something that made Yuna's breath catch in her throat. The small cub walked over to her, looked up, and climbed into her lap. Taiho made a strangled sound. Yuna, what is happening? I do not know. Yuna whispered. Velcari cubs did not sit in the laps of other species. Velcari cubs barely sat in the laps of their own families outside of immediate parents. It was an act of complete trust, of total surrender. It meant, I am safe with you. You are my family. Bora curled up in Yuna's lap, closed her golden eyes, and began to sleep. Kira watched her sister for a moment, then seemed to make a decision. She climbed up too, squeezing in next to Bora. The two cubs arranged themselves in a warm pile of fur and paws and tails, all on top of Yuna's legs. Yuna did not move. She barely breathed. She looked at Taiho with tears forming in her eyes. They are so warm, she whispered. Taiho slowly sat down next to his wife. He looked at the sleeping cubs, and despite his fear, he smiled. They do look comfortable. I have never held a baby before. Of any species. They are not exactly babies anymore. They are to me. For a long moment, the small kitchen was peaceful. The smells of cooking filled the air. The cubs slept deeply and peacefully. Yuna stroked their soft fur, feeling their small heartbeats under her hands. Taiho watched his wife, seeing a side of her he had not seen before. She looked like a mother. Then a sound came from outside. Heavy footsteps, approaching fast. The particular pattern of a Velcari walking with purpose. No, not just any Velcari. Yuna knew those footsteps. Everyone on the ship knew those footsteps. Captain Rova was coming. Taiho jumped to his feet. We have to hide them. Where? They are asleep on my lap. Wake them up. I cannot just. The door slid open. Captain Rova stood in the doorway, her massive frame blocking all the light from the corridor. Her golden eyes scanned the room in an instant, taking in everything. The cooking equipment, the strange smells. Her cubs, sleeping peacefully in the lap of a human. No one moved. The captain's eyes fixed on Yuna. They were unreadable, showing no emotion at all. This was the face she wore in battle, when death was near and choices had to be made. Human, she said in her deep voice. Explain. Yuna opened her mouth, but no words came out. What could she possibly say? There was no excuse that would make this acceptable. She had done the unthinkable. She had touched the captain's children. She had fed them foreign food. She had let them sleep in her arms, but the cubs were still sleeping, undisturbed by their mother's arrival. They slept with the deep peace of the truly content, their small bodies warm and relaxed. They looked healthier than Yuna had ever seen them look. They looked happy. She looked up at the captain and spoke the only truth she had. They came to me. They were hungry. I fed them. I'm sorry. The captain said nothing. She stared at the scene for a long, terrible moment. Then she stepped fully into the room and let the door close behind her. Whatever happened next would change everything. The silence in the small kitchen stretched on forever. Taiho stood frozen against the wall, barely breathing. Yuna sat perfectly still, the sleeping cubs warm in her lap. Captain Rova towered over them all, her expression carved from stone. Then the cubs began to stir. Kira woke first, her golden eyes blinking open. She saw her mother and made a happy sound, jumping down from Yuna's lap and running to Rova's feet. Bora followed more slowly, yawning and stretching before padding over to join her sister. Both cubs began talking at once, making rapid sounds in the Velcari language. They were excited, their tails wagging, their small paws patting at their mother's legs. Yuna could not understand the words, but she understood the tone. They were telling Rova about the food, about the warm food, about the nice human who gave them warm food. Rova listened to her children without moving. Her eyes stayed fixed on Yuna the entire time. When the cubs finished talking, she finally spoke. Come to my quarters. Both of you. Now." It was not a request. Yuna gently stood up, her legs stiff from sitting so long. Taiho moved to her side and took her hand. Together, they followed the captain out of the kitchen and through the corridors of the ship. The walk felt like a death march. Other crew members saw them pass and quickly looked away. A human couple being escorted by the captain meant trouble. Serious trouble. They reached the captain's private quarters, which were larger and more comfortable than any other room on the ship. Velcari decorations hung on the walls, things that looked like hunting trophies and family symbols. A large sleeping area took up one corner, clearly designed for a mother and her cubs to share. "Sit," Rova commanded, pointing to a low couch. Yuna and Taiho sat. The cubs ran off to play in a corner, still energetic from their nap and their meal. Rova remained standing, looking down at the humans with an expression Yuna could not read. "You fed my cubs cooked food," the captain said. "Yes," Yuna replied. There was no point in lying. "This is not done. This has never been done." "I know. I'm sorry. I did not plan it. They came to my door. They wanted to eat. I could not say no." Rova was quiet for a moment. She watched her cubs playing, wrestling with each other and making small happy sounds. Then she said something that surprised Yuna completely. "They have not played like that in months." Yuna looked at the cubs. They did seem more active than usual, more alive. "I do not understand." Rova slowly sat down across from the humans. Up close, Yuna could see tiredness in the captain's eyes. It was the tiredness of a mother who worried constantly about her children. "My cubs are small for their age," Rova said quietly. "The doctors do not know why. They eat well, but they do not grow. They get sick easily. They have less energy than other cubs. I have taken them to every healer and scientist I could find. No one can help." She paused, her voice becoming rougher with emotion. "This is not just my cubs. Across all Velcari colonies, our children are becoming weaker. Each generation is a little smaller, a little sicker than the one before. Our scientists have studied this for decades. They have found no answer. Some say our species is dying slowly, that we have reached the end of our time in the universe." Yuna felt her heart ache for this proud warrior who was watching her people decline. "I did not know. No one knows. We do not share our weakness with outsiders." Rova looked directly at Yuna. "But my cubs just ate your food, and they have more energy than I have seen in months. So now I am asking you, human, what did you feed them?" Yuna explained everything. She told Rova about cooking, about how heat changes food in ways that make it easier to digest. She explained how cooking breaks down tough proteins and releases hidden nutrients. She talked about her grandmother's recipes and how food was prepared on Earth. Rova listened carefully to every word. When Yuna finished, the captain was silent for a long time. "You were saying that cooking makes food better for the body?" "For some species, yes. Humans discovered this thousands of years ago. It changed everything for us. We could eat foods that were too tough or too dangerous raw. We got more energy from the same amount of food. Some scientists believe cooking helped our brains grow larger and smarter." Rova looked at her cubs again. Kira had climbed on top of a piece of furniture and was pretending to hunt her sister. Bora was hiding behind a chair, ready to jump out and surprise her twin. They were playing like healthy cubs should play. "Teach me," Rova said suddenly. "What?" "Teach me to make this warm food. I will try anything for my children. I do not care if other Velcari think it is strange or wrong. If there is a chance it could help them, I must try." Yuna was stunned. She had expected punishment, maybe even death. She had not expected the captain of the Wandering Star to ask her for cooking lessons. "I will teach you," Yuna said, "but on one condition." Rova's eyes narrowed. You dare to make conditions with me? Taiho squeezed Yuna's hand in warning, but she continued anyway. You must taste the food yourself first. I will not ask you to give your children something you are not willing to eat. For a moment, Rova looked angry. Then, slowly, something like respect appeared in her golden eyes. She nodded once. This is fair. A mother should test all dangers before her cubs. When do we begin? Now, if you want. The stew I made is still warm. Rova stood up and called to her cubs. Kira, Bora, come. We are going to the humans' cooking place. The cubs rushed over, excited at the mention of food. They clearly remembered the warm food and wanted more. Kira danced around her mother's legs, while Bora padded over to stand next to Yuna. Looking up at her with trusting eyes, Taiho leaned close to his wife and whispered, I thought we were going to die. So did I, Yuna whispered back. They walked back to the kitchen together, an unlikely group of humans and Velcari. The beginning of something new. The beginning of a change that would spread far beyond this one ship in the vast darkness of space. When they arrived, Yuna heated up the kimchi jjigae and prepared a bowl for the captain. This time, she included everything, even the spicy kimchi. If Rova was going to try human food, she should try real human food. Rova looked at the steaming bowl with suspicion. The smell was strong and strange to her nose. She picked up the spoon awkwardly, not used to eating with tools. She lifted a small amount of the stew to her mouth. She tasted it. Her golden eyes went wide. Her ears stood straight up. A shiver ran through her entire body. What is this? She demanded. Yuna felt fear return. Is it bad? I can make something simpler if bad? Rova interrupted. She took another bite, bigger this time. Then another. This is. I have no words for what this is. I have hunted the great ice beasts of my homeworld. I have eaten the finest raw meats in the galaxy. Nothing has ever tasted like this. She finished the bowl in seconds and held it out toward Yuna. More, said Captain Rova of the Wandering. Star, please. It was the first time Yuna had ever heard her say please. 3 months passed like a dream. Yuna's secret kitchen was no longer secret. It had grown into a proper cooking area with better equipment and more space. Captain Rova had ordered the changes herself, telling the crew that it was for scientific research. But everyone knew the truth. The smells of cooked food now drifted through the wandering star every day, and the captain's cubs could often be found near the kitchen, waiting for treats. Kira and Bora had changed. The ship's doctor examined them weekly and could not believe the results. They had gained weight and height. Their fur was thicker and shinier. They hardly ever got sick anymore. They played and ran and caused trouble like healthy cubs were supposed to. Other Velcari on the ship began to notice. Some were curious about the strange human food that seemed to help the cubs. Others were worried, afraid that cooking would make their species soft and weak. But the results were hard to argue with. The captain's children were thriving. Rova learned to cook. It was not easy for her. Her large paws were clumsy with small tools, and she had no patience for slow simmering or careful seasoning. But she practiced every day with Yuna, learning recipe after recipe. She started with simple things like grilled meat and steamed vegetables. Soon she was making complex stews and soups on her own. One evening, Taiho found Yuna crying in their quarters. "What is wrong?" he asked, rushing to her side. "Nothing is wrong," Yuna said, wiping her eyes. "I just received a message. The Velcari High Council has invited us to their homeworld. They want us to demonstrate cooking before their leaders." Taiho sat down heavily. "The High Council? That is the ruling body of the entire Velcari civilization. I know. They govern hundreds of planets and billions of people. I know. And they want us to cook for them?" Yuna laughed through her tears. Apparently, Captain Rova has been sending reports about her cubs. The council has been watching their progress. They want to see if cooking can help other Velcari children. The journey to the Velcari homeworld took 2 weeks. Yuna spent the entire time preparing, planning menus, and practicing recipes. She was terrified. What if the High Council did not like human food? What if it did not work for other Velcari the way it worked for Kira and Bora? But she was also excited. If cooking could help an entire civilization of children grow stronger and healthier, it would be the greatest thing she had ever done. Her grandmother's recipes might save millions of young lives. The Velcari homeworld was called the Frozen Heart. It was a beautiful planet covered in ice and snow, with great mountains and vast frozen seas. The Velcari had built their cities into the mountains, creating warm spaces inside the cold stone. Everything was massive and impressive, built for a race of giants. The Great Hall of the High Council was the largest room Yuna had ever seen. Stone pillars rose hundreds of feet into the air. Ancient banners hung from the walls, telling the history of the Velcari people. And seated on elevated platforms were the 12 elders who ruled this mighty civilization. They were old and scarred, veterans of countless battles and political struggles. Their fur was gray or white with age. Their golden eyes had seen empires rise and fall. And they were all staring at the small human woman who stood before them with pots and pans. "You are the one who has been feeding our children cooked food," said the eldest. A female named Elder Hana with a missing ear and a deep voice. "Yes, Elder," Yuna said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Some say you are poisoning our young. They say you are making them dependent on human ways. They say this is a plot to weaken our people." Yuna took a deep breath. "I am not here to weaken anyone. I am here because your children are already weak, and I might be able to help. Cooking has saved my species. It might save yours too. But you do not have to believe my words. You only have to taste my food." A murmur went through the hall. This small human had just challenged the High Council to try her strange cooking. It was bold, maybe too bold. But Yuna remembered what Rova had taught her. Velcari respected courage above all else. Elder Hana was silent for a long moment. Then she stood up, her old joints cracking. "Very well, human. Cook for us. Show us what you can do." Yuna had prepared for this moment. She had brought ingredients from the Wandering Star and from Earth. She had planned a menu that would work for Velcari digestion, while still showing the best of human cooking. Now she had to execute it perfectly. She worked for 3 hours, while the entire High Council watched. She grilled meat with herbs and spices. She made a rich soup with bone broth and vegetables. She prepared rice cooked with fragrant seasonings. And finally, she made a simplified version of her grandmother's kimchi jjigae, adjusted for Velcari tastes. The smells filled the great hall. Some elders wrinkled their noses in disgust, but others leaned forward with interest, their ancient instincts stirring just as the cubs' instincts had stirred months ago. When the food was ready, Yuna served each elder personally. She watched as they took their first bites of cooked food. Some hesitated. Some made faces. But one by one, they kept eating. Elder Hana finished her entire portion. Then she looked at Yuna with an expression the human could not read. "This taste," the elder said slowly. "It reminds me of something. A dream I had when I was young. A feeling of warmth I could never find in real life." She paused. "I want more." Other elders nodded. Even those who had seemed suspicious were asking for second portions. The High Council debated for 3 days. There were arguments and concerns and fears. But in the end, the decision was made. Human culinary experts would be invited to establish cooking schools across Velcari space. The experiment would begin with children, closely monitored by doctors and scientists. Yuna and Taiho stayed on the Velcari homeworld for another month, training the first generation of Velcari cooks. When they finally returned to the wandering star, they were welcomed as heroes. Captain Rova met them at the docking bay with Kira and Bora at her side. The cubs had grown even more in the month they were apart. They ran to Yuna and nearly knocked her over with their enthusiasm, climbing up her body and licking her face. "They missed you," Rova said, and there was warmth in her voice that had never been there before. "I missed them too," Yuna replied, hugging the furry cubs tightly. Later that evening there was a ceremony. Captain Rova presented Yuna with a small metal crest, engraved with ancient Velcari symbols. "This is my family mark," Rova explained. "By giving it to you, I am formally adopting you into my clan. You are now part of my family, and my cub's family, for all generations to come." Yuna's eyes filled with tears as she accepted the crest. "I am honored." "You should be," Rova said, but she was smiling. "It has been 1,000 years since any non-Velcari received this honor." Taiho watched from the side, his heart full of pride. His wife had come to space to study alien life. She had never imagined she would end up changing an entire civilization with nothing more than her grandmother's recipes. That night, they all ate dinner together in the kitchen that had started everything. Yuna, Taiho, Rova, and the cubs sat around a low table covered with dishes. There was Korean food and Velcari food and combinations of both. There was laughter and conversation, and the simple joy of sharing a meal. Kira and Bora sat on either side of Yuna, pressing against her like they had done on that first day. But now it was not desperate hunger that drew them close. It was love. Pure, simple love for the human who had given them warmth when they did not even know they were cold. "Second mother," Bora said quietly, using one of the few human words she had learned. Yuna looked down at the small cub, surprised. "What did you say?" "Second mother," Bora repeated, nuzzling against Yuna's arm. "That is what they call you now," Rova explained. "In our culture, a second mother is someone who cares for cubs alongside their birth mother. It is a position of great honor and great responsibility." Yuna could not speak. She just held the cubs closer and let the tears fall freely. Taiho raised his cup in a toast. "To my wife," he said, "who conquered an empire with a soup pot." Everyone laughed, even the cubs who did not quite understand the joke. The sound echoed through the ship, warm and alive and full of hope. Outside, the stars stretched on forever, cold and distant. But inside this small room, there was warmth. There was family. There was food shared with love. And somewhere far away, Velcari children were tasting cooked food for the first time. They were growing stronger. They were growing healthier. They were beginning to thrive. All because one human woman missed her grandmother's cooking. Yuna looked at the people around her table, alien and human alike, and she thought about what her grandmother used to say. "Food is not just what we eat. Food is love made visible. Food is warmth that travels across any distance, even the cold void between stars." She picked up her chopsticks and began to eat. The universe would never be the same.